Hey, TFH Oakland, welcome to our first Sunday sit down. This is where we take our Sunday message and we create a micro teaching and conversation to drive us deeper and closer to God. And so this first week, we've been talking about turning over tables. We looked at Jesus, how he went into the temple, he saw injustice, he saw the marginalization of a particular group or groups of people, and he saw that people were being void of the opportunity to worship God. People were separated. They were segregated in such a way. And Jesus, with the burden of God for God's house, he said something has to change. And we realized that Jesus was angry. Jesus was happy. Jesus was emotional. We know that God has emotions. God is not foreign. And so some of the things that we want to unpack today is so many people are seeing what they're seeing. We're locked in our homes, and it's really hard to digest the imagery. You know, in preparing for the weekend, I was just thinking about the power of imagery. You know, imagery demands a response. You can see a video, you can see a recording, you can see a painting, you can see a sunset, you can see all of these things, and depending on your interpretation, will definitely drive the conversation. It will drive how you view, how you respond. And so what we want to do is this, and all the things that we're seeing, we don't want a moderate view, we want a godly view. We want a kingdom perspective, and we want to be able to respond in a kingdom way. And so some of the things that we want to unpack today is really, this is for leaders. This is for people that are living their lives and they're dealing with all of these emotions, and how do we live with these emotions? So the first question that we want to unpack today is this: can people, leaders, or just people, those that are just living their life. I think all of us are leaders in some capacity. Can leaders live or lead with anger? Now, this is a great question, because as I grew up as a leader, especially a young leader, I was told that, kind of taught, like, if you have emotions, walk through those emotions before you share those emotions. I used to believe that I was not a very emotional person. I'm actually a very emotional person. I'm not very much of a private person. It's pretty much like I share everything. But I was always taught that you walk through your emotions before you have dialogue, before you share them openly. And emotions can be tricky because emotions can blind us. Emotions can get the best of us. And I think emotions are real. I think we should take inventory on when we have those emotions, but those emotions should be processed. I want to give a couple of ways of unpacking this. Can we live or lead with anger? Well, the first thing we have to recognize is this: where is that anger coming from? When anger rises up, when we see injustice, where is that anger coming from? And most importantly, where is that anger leading us to? You see, anger is a strong force. I don't know if you've been angry at your spouse, or you've been angry at a parent or a child, but I know that when I'm angry, anger wants me to shut down things. I want to shut down the conversation. I want to hit the eject button and see that other person literally leave the landscape, leave the conversation. And so where is that anger coming from, and where is that anger leading us to, should be the questions that we ask ourselves when we're dealing with anger. And one of the things that it says, I love this verse of scripture in Ephesians 4:26, Paul says this. He says, "Be angry at sin, at immorality, and injustice, at ungodly behavior." He says, be angry at it, yet do not sin. Do not let your anger cause you shame, nor allow it to last until the sun goes down. Leave no room or foothold for the devil. So during this Sunday sit down, people are angry. People are frustrated, and the Bible is very clear how we're supposed to respond to anger, and especially as leaders. It's okay to be angry, and we should be angry by a lot of the things that we're seeing. But we cannot allow our anger to lead us in such a way that it causes us shame, that we put shame in association with our relationship with Jesus. I think we need to be mindful of what we're posting. I think we need to be mindful of what we're saying and how we're saying it. I don't think we need to sugarcoat a lot of things. I think we need to be honest and candid. But I do think we need to take in consideration that we as kingdom people, we're not just looking at inequality in race. We're looking at God's way of viewing people. And that is the thing that needs to be resculpted and changed. So when it comes to anger, it is okay to be angry. And what Paul is talking to us and telling us is this: there's a duration to how long that anger lasts. If we live and stew in anger, and that is the very thing that feeds us and guides us and leads us, it's only going to cause shame and destruction. It's only going to cause more hurt and more pain inside of us. Paul says that anger must lead us to action. That anger must drive us to see something change. That anger doesn't just lead us to more destruction. That anger leads us to construction. As a leader, it's okay for us to be angry, but it should lead us to do something with that anger. I think all of us have this feeling and share these emotions right now. So when it comes to the injustice that we're seeing, how should we or I respond to what I'm seeing? So that's the next question. How do I process this anger? What does it look like for me to process this anger? And how should I respond? And so in unpacking how should I respond, let's look at this. In light of everything that I'm seeing, I'm angry, I have feelings, I have thoughts. How should I respond? Now, when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, I think there's two voices that are at hand. There is a hashtag Black Lives Matter, and there's also an organization, Black Lives Matter. And I think we should be clear on that because they may not be the same thing at the same time. So when it comes to Black Lives Matter, which we believe Black Lives Matter, we believe that all lives matter. And until Black lives are associated with equality of all lives mattering, there's a problem that we need to work on and fix. And so with this movement, the first thing that we have to understand in processing this, in order for us to see change, we have to influence the very areas that we're responsible for. So if we want to see change within our nation, it starts somewhere. And I think that's what people are looking for. And they're asking pastors, they're asking social media, and they're asking leaders, where does it start for me? And we cannot really answer that question, except for prayer. We can say, yes, it starts in prayer. But on a practical next step for you, what does that look like? But I believe where we can start is this. It starts with our family. We are responsible for our family. What kind of conversations are we having with our kids? Here's the thing that does break my heart. Me as a father, I'm educating my 5-year-old daughter on what is going on in the world. And I'm selective with my words. But the thing that breaks my heart is that I have to educate her that racism does exist and that we still treat people with love and the goodness of God. But those are conversations that we have to have. Those are the kind of conversations that must take place in order for us to see the change that we want to see. The first thing, what's happening in our family? Another area that we can focus on is, are we personally aware of what's happening within us? You know, some people right now, they're angry and they're just sitting in that anger. They're just angry and they have nothing to do with that anger. Become personally aware and include other people in that conversation. As a leader, when I'm processing my emotions, I always, not always, that's a lie. I most of the time go to my wife and say, this is how I'm feeling. A lot of times my wife has to draw those things out. But one of the things that have been the greatest safeguard in my life is actually having people that I can talk to. And for us to become personally aware of what's happening and dealing and processing with our feelings and our anger, it's not always safe to do that alone. And maybe you're a bottler. Maybe you're that type of person that literally just kind of hides and shelters yourself. You will explode. Or maybe you're just a person that's just led by emotions. You're just like, oh, this is how I feel. This is how I feel. That may not be the healthiest either. There's a way that we can partner with people and also partner with God and saying, God, help me to understand what am I feeling and what I'm experiencing. And Lord, how can that be translated through you? How can that be translated into the areas that I have influence with? So we do want to focus on ourselves. We want to become aware of what's happening in our family. How can we bring influence and change in our family? And then I believe that every leader can not only take what is they're passionate about, what they're enraged about, but they can also bring clarity and bring education to their sphere of influence. And everyone has different spheres of influence. You and I won't be able to reach the same people. So we need to focus on what groups. So if you're a teacher, maybe there's opportunities in the classroom that you can begin to have conversations. Maybe you're a mom or a dad, or maybe a brother or a sister. Maybe you own a business. There are spheres of influence that you can bring change. I know a lot of people are saying, well, how do I give, or what do I give to? We're trying to figure those things out. How do we see things change? How do we break the chain of injustice in our city? Even for myself, I believe there's other spheres of influence that I need to go and be a part of. After seeing all the things that we've seen in our church with gun violence and negligence, and our close friend Miles, his life was lost, and then seeing all of the news that has happened, we realize that something needs to change. And as a spiritual leader, not only am I responsible to take responsibility for this sphere of influence, But I believe that there's also God calling us to expand that sphere of influence. There are other opportunities that God wants us to step into in order for us to see change and bring change into those particular areas. And the last thing that I want to leave off is this, is that we have to build towards our burdens. And what I mean by that is this, is that God gives us each a burden. There is something in all of us that when we see injustice, it just triggers emotion. It triggers something inside of us. And it may be far-fetched, it may be a little outside of our scope, but I believe that when we become clear on what the burden that God has given us, we need to start making those steps gradually to seeing change in those particular areas. One of the things for me is that I was burdened by the city of Oakland. I saw the beauty, I see the potential. I love this city. I think this city is the best city in the world. I love the food, I love the people, I love the climate, I love the culture, but I still saw the brokenness that was in this city. I still saw that Jesus was not apparent everywhere. And I wanted Jesus to be involved in every conversation. And so as my family and I started making small steps, it started with a burden. And I believe that if you're a leader, which we're all leaders, where's that burden for you? What literally pulls on your heart? Where do you feel that gravitational pull, that struggle with? You say, I really want to see change in this area. Well, it has to start somewhere. If we want to see big change, we've got to take small steps. And I think in this Sunday sit down, what we're addressing is this. It is okay to have anger, but don't let that anger lead you. Let the Spirit of God lead you with that anger. That anger should lead us to change, and we need to take responsibility for the areas that we actually can change. Have those conversations in those particular areas. Start with yourself. Start with your family. Start with your sphere of influence. And then also begin to build toward those other areas that you want to see change in. Literally get a game plan. Write something down. If you're starting to get frustrated, infuriated by what you're seeing with brutality, get involved and figure out what is the next step for you personally. I believe that God is calling us to go deeper. God is calling us to be stronger in this season, and God is calling us to do it together. Thank you so much for this first Sunday sit down. Hopefully it was beneficial and effective. Feel free to review these questions in a small group format, or you can go through them personally, but we're in this together. And so we would love for you to continue to open this up, ask some friends to say, hey, let's talk about some of these things. How can we move the needle forward, and what does change look like for us? God bless you guys, and we will see you soon.